Good morning, my name is Ola Atamanova, and I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's day 489 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And now we will be talking about the situation in the south of our country. Joining us online is Natalia Humeniuk, head of the United Coordinating Press Center of Security and Defense Forces of the south of Ukraine. Good morning, Miss Natalia. Glory to Ukraine. Good morning. Glory to the heroes. Miss Natalia, what can you say about the current situation in the south? We know that the situation is changing quite dynamically. What are the news? Yes, the situation remains tense and very dynamic. Really, as our commander-in-chief says, there is advance in all the directions, but we have to realize that during the battles, when the military operation is being organized, we need to maintain this regime that mass media do not really like, but this regime is very productive for the further actions. Development is the regime of information silence. So talking about our area, we can say that we have a very powerful counter artillery battles, very loud, but in all other areas we maintain the information silence, which is very important to preserve the lives of both our military and civilians who are forced to be engaged in these kind of situations. So we can say that within the last day in the southern directions we fulfilled the battle tasks, which resulted into the decrease of the number of enemy units for at least 11 material and 11 personnel, including boats which the occupiers used to find new positions for their mortar teams, and heavy artillery that enemy tries to use to attack the West Bank and terrorize the civilians. We continue our military work, and the enemy continues terrorizing our civilians, including using aviation and guided aviation bombs. Now they bomb the occupied territories, reverting to their tactics. 1-2, Miss Natalia, we're not hearing you right now, unfortunately. Can you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you now. I can repeat the last phrase if... Well, we've heard that where the occupied territories are being bombed. Yes, absolutely. And they blame our security and defense forces for that, because this is the favorite tactics of the terrorists to blame all the fault on the security and defense forces, to put the people against the security and defense forces, so they don't feel any emotional upheaval in expecting for our defense forces advance. So this is a propagandist work that does not work on our people in the occupied territories. It does not switch on any reflexes in the people in the East Bank, because the people know who really bombs them. Ms. Natalia, we've heard some information regarding the West Bank of Dnipro yesterday, or we still cannot say anything about that due to the regime of information silence. 1-2. Well, you probably mean the East Bank. Yes, exactly, I mean the East Bank. So that information about the East Bank. Once again, I want to address the mass media that you have to know when to inform the community on what, and you have to rely on the information from the military. Those who do the job will report on the job done. Don't hurry, because any such hurry may result in loss of lives. When it's justified, when it's reasonable, we will report and we will give you the opportunity to cover all those events. Now, given the fact that the front line in our direction goes along the riverbed of Dnipro, and the offensive is complicated by the consequences of man-made disaster, it's critically important to maintain the regime of information silence. Don't follow the statements of the Russian reporters who provoke such news, and then they thus justify the bombardments, because thus we put the lives of civilians and our military in jeopardy. Miss Natalia, what do you document in the Black Sea? What is the situation in the Black Sea? The enemy obviously has taken a tactical pause in the Black Sea because all the missile carriers are at their bases. There is one ship in the Sea of Azov and 7 in the Black Sea. They fulfill the aerial reconnaissance using the unmanned aerial vehicles, which says that the enemy may be planning further air raid attacks, including using aviation, both strategic and tactical, and the sea-to-surface missiles. The enemy may also be using land-to-land missiles because there is some missile hunger in some categories of missiles. However, they have not stopped their manufacturing capacities, and thus they may replenish their missile potential. The sanctions unfortunately don't work to the extent that would impede them manufacturing new missiles. Miss Natalia, we've heard the news about the Chongar bridge. Can we say that this bridge is under fire control of our forces? They've felt that it's not only about fire control, but about the unity of the security and defense forces, and the resistance forces, together with the Crimeans who understand all the prospects of advancements of the armed forces of Ukraine. So this fire control is existing even in such remote areas which were considered unreachable for us by the occupiers. But now that the logistics is complicated through Shankar pathway, they use the Armansk pathway, which is closer to the positions of security and defense forces, but they are nervous because they cannot fully use it to the full extent because of the proximity. So this tension is based on their moral inconfidence. So this is the continuation of our offensive but this time in the heads of the enemy. Miss Natalia, the situation about Zaporizhia NPP is still very tense. Do you have any news from there? What is the situation for the time being over there? We continue documenting that this situation is still very dangerous for our civilians. Well, we don't have to lose vigilance. We have to realize that Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is one of the key elements in the chain of the man-made blackmailing that the enemy tries to use to force Ukrainian security and defense forces along with the international community to get readjusted according to their plans. But it's the blackmailing, first of all, and secondly is the blackmailing that can be exercised by the enemy, which enemy has proved by the catastrophe on Kakhovka Dam. But in this case, the consequences may be of continental level, and we have to realize it. We have to get our international partners engaged in this work to the maximum extent, and we appreciate all the input of our international partners in, the pressure on the occupier. Ms. Natalia, 3 weeks have passed after the catastrophe in Kakhovka Dam. To what extent have our forces coped with the consequences of this disaster? And we understand that for the population and environment, the consequences are horrible and they will persist for years to come. But have our military forces overcome the consequences, and are we advancing? Well, it did not create any obstacles for for our security and defense forces, such as the enemy was counting on, and they all fall into a global plan of advance of our security and defense forces, which the occupier is afraid of. The occupiers continue realizing that even such a difficult situation created by this catastrophe did not stop the offensive of the armed forces. We continue our battle work. It brings results and it goes according to the plan which was previously coordinated, and I'm sure soon we will witness the results that will be of joy to everybody. Well, thank you for wrapping up on this positive note. Thank you for joining our broadcast. I'm reminding you, dear colleagues, joining us was Natalia Humeniuk, head of the United Coordinated Press Center of the Security and Defense Forces of the South of Ukraine, and we want to thank our security and defense forces. Continue working together for our victory, and glory to Ukraine.